My name is Tula Meadows. I'm 28. I wish you were never born. My father said that, at my own birthday dinner, in front of 43 people. The candles on the cake were still lit. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. My stepmother nodded like he'd just confirmed the weather forecast. My half-sister pointed her phone at my face and kept recording. That was 4 months ago. Since then, I haven't raised my voice. I haven't cried in front of a single person. But I did something that made my father call me 17 times in one night. And by the 18th call, his voice wasn't angry anymore. It was begging. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are right now. Now let me take you back to 3 days before my birthday, the night I found out what the party was really for. I need you to understand something about the Meadows family before any of this makes sense. My father, Gerald Meadows, is 58, broad shoulders, deep voice, the kind of man who walks into a room and expects everyone to rearrange themselves around him. For as long as I can remember, he was the center of every holiday table, every family gathering, every decision. No one questioned Gerald, not once. My mother, Emily, died when I was 8. Complications after a surgery, something that went wrong months after she had me. I didn't understand it then. I barely understand it now. But what I understood early, what I felt in every silence, every skipped bedtime story, every look my father gave me when he thought I wasn't watching, was this. He blamed me. He never said it out loud. Not back then. He didn't need to. It lived in the things he didn't do. He didn't come to my school plays. He didn't hang my drawings on the fridge. When I got the flu in 4th grade, it was my grandmother, Eleanor, who drove 40 minutes to pick me up. Not him. Eleanor was my father's mother. She was the only person in that house who made me feel like I had a right to exist. She called me my girl. She came to every single recital. She died 2 years ago, and some days I still reach for my phone to call her. After my mother passed, my father remarried. Linda Holt became Linda Holt Meadows. She brought Brielle, her daughter, from a previous marriage. Brielle was 4 years younger than me, blonde, loud, and instantly, permanently, the favorite. I was moved to the smallest room upstairs. My mother's photos came down. Linda's went up. And that was just the beginning. 4 years ago, my father lost his job at a logistics company. Downsizing, they said. He never looked for another one. I was already working as a registered nurse at the community hospital. 12-hour shifts, night rotations, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and doesn't leave. When the first mortgage notice came, Gerald left it on the kitchen counter without a word. Linda mentioned it at dinner like she was commenting on the weather. Someone should probably handle that, she said. She looked at me. So I handled it. The mortgage, the electric, the water, the property tax, the homeowner's insurance. $2,800 a month straight from my paycheck. I set up autopay so I wouldn't have to think about it. I told myself it was temporary. Gerald would find work. Things would balance out. They didn't. Instead, Linda got comfortable. She discovered my credit card had a supplementary card, one she'd somehow talked Gerald into authorizing. I'd see charges I didn't make. A $300 coat for Brielle, shoes, a handbag, then a $1,200 designer bag charged 3 weeks before my birthday. When I brought it up, Gerald shut me down in 4 words. She's your sister, Tula. She wasn't, but I stopped correcting him years ago. What kept me quiet was a promise. Eleanor, in her last weeks, held my hand and said, "Keep this family together, my girl. They'll fall apart without you." I believed her. I thought if I just kept paying, kept showing up, kept being the responsible one, eventually they'd see me. Eventually my father would look at me and see something other than the daughter who cost him his wife. I was wrong. But that $1,200 bag? That was the first crack. 3 nights before my birthday, I came home from a double shift at 1 in the morning. The house was supposed to be dark. It wasn't. A light bled from under the kitchen door, and I could hear voices, low, deliberate, the kind people use when they don't want to be overheard. I stopped on the stairs, held my breath. Linda's voice came first, clear as glass. "We announce it at her birthday. 40 people. If she says no in front of everyone, she looks selfish. If she says yes, problem solved. My father's voice, slower. And if she makes a scene? Then you do what you should have done years ago. A pause. Cut her off. I pressed my back against the wall. My scrubs were still damp from work. My hands were shaking. Not from cold. They were talking about my savings, $52,000, 6 years of overtime, holiday shifts, skipped vacations, every dollar I had that wasn't already draining into their mortgage and their electricity, and Linda's credit card charges. Brielle was engaged. I didn't even know until that moment. And they wanted my money to pay for her wedding. Not asked, wanted, planned, choreographed, down to the audience. She owes this family, Linda said. Her voice had no hesitation. It's time to collect. I backed up the stairs, one step at a time. My heart was slamming so hard I was certain they could hear it. They didn't. I sat on my bed in that tiny room for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every payment, every silent dinner, every time I swallowed the word no, because I was afraid of what would happen if I said it. Something shifted that night. I didn't know what yet, but it was already moving. The next morning I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and made a phone call I'd been putting off for 2 years. Margaret Calloway, 64, estate attorney, my grandmother's closest friend for 3 decades. Eleanor had mentioned her name exactly once in her final days, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. If you ever need to understand what I've left behind, Eleanor had whispered, call Margaret. I'd written the number on the back of a grocery receipt and tucked it into my wallet. It stayed there, untouched, through Eleanor's funeral, through 2 years of bills and silence and a house that never felt like mine. Margaret picked up on the second ring. Tula Meadows, she said, like she'd been expecting me. Your grandmother told me you'd call eventually. I need to know what she left, I said. I think I need to know now. Come to my office. There are things your grandmother wanted you to know, when you were ready. She paused. Are you ready? I think so. Then I'll have everything prepared. I scheduled the appointment for the following week, after the birthday dinner. Whatever was coming, I needed to get through Saturday first. That afternoon, Brielle found me in the kitchen. She held up her left hand, wiggling a diamond ring I'd never seen before. You're gonna help with my wedding, right? She smiled. Dad says you have some savings. I looked at the ring. I looked at her face. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely believed I existed to fund her life. That was worse. We'll talk about it later, I said. I didn't know what Margaret had for me, but I knew one thing. Whatever Eleanor left behind, she left it for a reason. My grandmother was a careful woman, very careful. Let me tell you what $52,000 means when you're a nurse. It means 6 years of picking up every holiday shift nobody wanted. Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve. It means eating leftovers from the break room instead of going out. It means driving a car with 200,000 miles on it because the monthly payment on a new one would slow the savings down. That money was supposed to be my way out. A down payment on a small place of my own. A life that didn't revolve around auto-pay transfers to a house where nobody thanked me. If I gave it to Brielle's wedding, I'd be starting from zero at 28 with nothing to show for a decade of work. No safety net, no future, just a pretty reception I helped pay for and a seat at the back of the church. But here's the thing that burned the most. It wasn't the money, it was the pattern. When I was 18, I applied for a nursing scholarship. Full tuition. I got accepted. The letter arrived in a white envelope addressed to me, and I never saw it. I found out 2 years later, by accident, when a former teacher mentioned it at a grocery store. Didn't you take that scholarship, Tula? You were the top candidate. I went home and searched, found the opened envelope in my father's desk drawer, shoved behind old tax forms. He'd read it. He never told me. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. You weren't ready, he said. You would have failed. I paid my own way through nursing school. Loans, night shifts at a diner, 3 years of sleeping 4 hours a night. Every time I built something, he found a way to take it. This time, I decided to stop handing him the hammer. In the Meadows family, Gerald was the oldest brother. That meant something. In our family, The oldest didn't just lead, he narrated. He decided who was generous and who was selfish, who was loyal and who was difficult. The rest followed because it was easier than fighting. My Uncle Roy was the only person who ever pushed back. He's Gerald's younger brother, a carpenter. Quiet guy, hands like sandpaper, the kind of man who says 10 words where other people say 100. 5 years ago, at Thanksgiving, Roy looked across the table and said, "Gerald, you're too hard on that girl." That was it. One sentence. Gerald didn't yell. He simply stopped inviting Roy to anything, stopped returning his calls. Within 6 months, Roy was erased from every family gathering like he'd never existed. That's what I was facing. Not just my father, the entire architecture of a family built around his version of events. 2 days before the party, Linda started making calls. I know because I heard her from the hallway, on speakerphone, cycling through aunts and cousins with the same rehearsed script. "Tula's been so difficult lately. She won't help with anything. Gerald gives, and she just takes." She called Aunt Patricia, Cousin Hannah, even my father's old college friend, planting seeds, framing the story before I ever got a chance to tell mine. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Patricia. "Honey, what's going on? Your father says you've been giving them a hard time." I stood in my room, phone pressed to my ear, and realized the trial had already happened. The verdict was in, and I hadn't even been allowed to testify. I was walking into that birthday dinner already convicted. The only question was whether I'd accept the sentence. The night before my birthday, I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Dark circles under my eyes from a 56-hour work week. Hair pulled back in a knot I hadn't bothered to fix. My scrubs still smelled like antiseptic. This is what a person looks like when they've been hollowed out slowly, I thought. Not by one event, by 1,000 small ones. 1,000 moments where someone said, "You're not enough," without ever using those words. Linda's voice carried through the wall. She was on the phone again. I could hear the tinny echo of speakerphone from the master bedroom. "She's always been jealous of Brielle. You know how it is. Some kids just don't have it in them to be grateful." I pressed my ear to the wall. I couldn't help it. "Gerald's given her everything," Linda continued. "A roof, food, stability, and she can't even do this one thing for her sister? Honestly, I don't know what Emily would think." Emily. My mother's name. In Linda's mouth, used as a weapon. My hands went flat against the wall. I closed my eyes. For a second, just 1 second, I wanted to open that door and scream. Scream until the neighbors heard. Scream until someone in this house finally understood what it felt like to be me. But I didn't. Because screaming was what they expected. Screaming was what Linda had prepped 43 people to witness. The dramatic, ungrateful stepdaughter, making a scene. I stepped back from the wall, sat on the edge of my bed, and I thought about something Eleanor used to say. "Quiet strength, my girl. Let them shout. You just keep standing." So that's what I did. I picked out a dress for my birthday, and I stood. Saturday evening. Rossini's, a mid-range Italian restaurant on the east side with exposed brick walls and warm pendant lighting. Gerald had booked the private dining room. 43 people. I walked in wearing the only nice dress I owned, navy blue, modest. I'd curled my hair, put on lipstick. For the first time in months, I wanted to feel like someone worth celebrating. The room buzzed with conversation. White tablecloths, candles in glass holders. A banner stretched across the back wall. "Happy birthday, Tula." Someone had ordered a cake. Chocolate, my favorite. For a moment I let myself believe it was real. Then I noticed the seating. The main table, the one directly under the banner, had 5 chairs, Gerald at the head, Linda to his right, Brielle next to Linda, Derek Collins, Brielle's fiancé, beside her, and one empty seat for Gerald's college friend. My name was on a place card at a smaller table, near the kitchen door, at my own birthday dinner. I picked up the card and sat down without a word. People greeted me as they passed, quick hugs. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." But the conversations always drifted. "Brielle, show me that ring. When's the wedding?" "Linda, you must be thrilled." I watched from my table, sipping water, smiling when someone glanced my way. Then Gerald stood. He tapped his glass with a butter knife. The room quieted. He picked up the small wireless microphone the restaurant had provided. He looked out at 43 faces. He smiled. "Tonight is special," he began. "Not just because of Tula's birthday," my chest tightened, "but because we have a very exciting announcement." He turned toward Brielle. His whole face lit up. And I understood right then that this party had never been for me. "Our beautiful Brielle," Gerald said into the microphone, "is engaged." The room erupted. Applause, squeals, chairs scraped back as people stood to hug Brielle. She rose from the main table, hand extended, diamond catching the pendant light like a tiny spotlight built just for her. For the next 10 minutes, my birthday evaporated. Aunt Patricia clasped Brielle's hand and examined the ring. Cousin Hannah took a photo for Instagram. Gerald's college friend clapped Derek on the back. Linda stood behind Brielle, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, beaming like she'd just won something. No one looked at me. I sat at my table by the kitchen door. The cake with my name on it sat untouched at the end of the buffet. The candles hadn't been lit. Derek caught my eye once. He was standing slightly apart from the circle around Brielle, his jaw tight. He gave me a look I couldn't quite read, not pity exactly, something closer to recognition. Like he saw what was happening, but didn't know what to do about it. Then the room settled. People returned to their seats. Gerald stayed standing, microphone still in hand. "Now," he said. His voice shifted, warmer, practiced. He turned toward me. "Tula, honey, come here for a second." 43 people looked at me. I stood, walked to the main table. My heels clicked against the tile floor. Gerald put a hand on my shoulder, firm, performative. "Family takes care of family," he said to the room. "And now that Brielle's big day is coming, we need to pull together." He looked directly at me. "Tula, we need to talk about the wedding budget. Not in private, not later. Here, now, in front of everyone, exactly as Linda had planned." "Tula has been very responsible with her finances," Gerald said, addressing the room like a keynote speaker. "She's been saving for years, and I know she'll want to help her sister have the wedding she deserves." He squeezed my shoulder. The pressure said, "Agree." I stood still. Linda leaned forward in her chair. She dabbed her eye with a napkin, a gesture so practiced it could have been choreographed. "It's what your mother would have wanted, Tula." The room went soft. A few people murmured. Someone whispered, "Oh, Emily, my mother, my dead mother, used to guilt me into writing a check in front of 43 witnesses." I felt the blood rise to my face. My pulse was so loud I was sure the people at the nearest table could hear it. "This is my birthday dinner," I said. My voice came out steady, quiet. "Can we not do this here?" Gerald's smile thinned. His hand dropped from my shoulder. "Another time?" He shook his head slowly. "You always say another time, Tula. Not now. Never when it matters." His volume climbed. Not shouting. Gerald never shouted. He commanded, "I have given you a home, a family, 20 years of patience, and you can't do this one thing?" The room was a held breath, forks down, napkins still. Aunt Patricia stared at her plate. Cousin Hannah gripped her water glass. Brielle pulled out her phone, tilted the screen toward me. A tiny red dot blinked in the corner. Recording. I looked at the dot. I looked at Brielle. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For 1 second her hand trembled, like she almost lowered it. She didn't. Gerald stepped closer. His face was red now. "If you can't do this one thing for your family..." He didn't finish. Not yet. I spoke before he could finish. "I'm not giving away my savings, Dad." My voice didn't waver. "That money is for my future." The room shifted. Someone inhaled sharply near the back. I could feel 43 sets of eyes on my skin like heat lamps. Gerald stopped moving. His jaw tightened. Something behind his eyes went flat, like a switch being flipped. He stared at me for what felt like a full minute. It was probably 5 seconds. Then he said it. "I wish you were never born." Not screaming, not whispering, just stating it. The way you'd read a line from a receipt. Factual, final. The room didn't gasp. It froze. Sound left the space entirely. I could hear the muffled clink of dishes from the kitchen behind the wall. The instrumental music from the overhead speakers suddenly felt obscene, like someone playing a flute at a car accident. Aunt Patricia set her fork down very slowly. Linda didn't speak. She simply looked at Gerald, then at me, and nodded. One small, certain nod. As if she'd been waiting for this sentence for years. Brielle's phone was still pointed at my face. Her hand was shaking now, but she didn't lower it. Derek, behind Brielle, pushed his chair back from the table, not standing, just creating distance. His expression had gone tight, closed, like a man recalculating something he'd already decided. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack, like ice on a pond in early spring, quiet, deep, the kind of fracture you can't see from the surface. I looked at my father. I looked at the room full of people who heard those words and chose silence. And I made a decision. I didn't cry. I picked up my napkin from the table, folded it once, twice, set it down neatly beside my untouched water glass. I looked around the room one more time. 43 people. Some stared at their plates. Some looked at Gerald. A few looked at me. With what? Pity? Shock? I couldn't tell anymore. It didn't matter. Nobody spoke. I turned to the room and said the only thing I had left. Thank you all for coming to my birthday. Then I picked up my bag from the back of my chair, walked across the dining room, and pushed through the door. The night air hit me like cold water. I made it to my car in the parking lot before my hands started shaking. I sat behind the wheel for 3 minutes, gripping it, breathing through my nose like I was coaching a patient through a panic episode. Then I reached for my phone. One contact. One call. Margaret Calloway picked up on the first ring, at 10:15 on a Saturday night. Margaret, I said. I want to come in tomorrow. I'm ready. A pause. Then her voice. Calm, unsurprised, like she'd been keeping a seat warm. I'll have everything prepared, Tula. 9 a.m. I hung up. I didn't know what everything meant yet. I didn't know what Eleanor had left behind, or why Margaret had been waiting for my call for 2 years. All I knew was that my grandmother had never done anything without a reason. She was deliberate about her recipes, her garden, her Sunday phone calls. She would have been deliberate about this too. I turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot. I didn't look at the restaurant in the rearview mirror, not once. 6:30 a.m. The house was silent. I'd packed the night before. One suitcase, one duffel bag, only things that were mine, clothes, my nursing license in its frame, a photo of Eleanor and me at the county fair when I was 11. I left everything else. I carried the bags downstairs in 2 trips, stepping over the creaky 3rd step by habit. No one stirred. Gerald's snoring rumbled from behind the master bedroom door. Linda's sleep mask was probably still on. At the kitchen table, I sat down and opened my laptop. 15 minutes of precise, quiet work. First, I transferred my savings to a new account at a different bank. Every cent moved. Second, I called the credit card company's automated line and canceled the supplementary card, effective immediately. Third, I confirmed the lease on a studio apartment 6 miles across town. I toured it the previous week on my lunch break without telling anyone. 400 square feet, clean, mine. Before I left, I placed a single envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside, 4 years of bank statements, every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every utility bill, every tax installment, highlighted, totaled, dated, $134,000, all from my account, all for this house. No letter, no explanation, no "I told you so." Just numbers. I zipped my jacket, picked up my bags, and walked to the front door. The hallway was still dark. The house smelled like Linda's lavender diffuser and old carpet. I'd lived here for 20 years. I'd paid for it for 4. I turned the knob, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut behind me. It clicked. Soft. Final. I loaded the car and drove east into a sky that was just beginning to turn pink. I did not come back. I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever had to leave a place you called home, not because you wanted to, but because you had no other choice, type "I understand" in the comments. I read every single one. And if you think I should forgive my father or set a permanent boundary, let me know that too. Because the story is about to take a turn I didn't see coming. Here's what I learned later, pieced together from Uncle Roy and Cousin Hannah. Sunday morning. Linda walked into the kitchen around 9. She noticed the envelope on the counter but pushed it aside to make coffee. She climbed the stairs to tell me breakfast was ready, not out of kindness, out of habit. My room was empty, closet cleared, bed stripped to the mattress. She called Gerald. Her voice was flat, almost amused. She actually left. Gerald came upstairs, looked at the bare room, shrugged. Good, let her sulk. She'll be back by Friday. He went downstairs and turned on the television. Brielle woke up next. She reached for her phone and opened the banking app. The supplementary credit card was declined, frozen, canceled. She called me. Voicemail, called again. Voicemail. She walked into the living room, phone in hand. My card's not working. Did Tula do something? Gerald glanced at her. She's throwing a tantrum. It'll pass. Linda found the envelope on the counter again. She picked it up, weighed it in her hand, then set it back down unopened. Probably some dramatic goodbye letter, she said. I'm not giving her the satisfaction. By Monday afternoon, Gerald had called me 4 times, each time voicemail. He left one message. Tula, this is childish. Call me back. By Wednesday, silence from my end. Not a single text, email, or returned call. Gerald told Aunt Patricia I was going through a phase. He told his college friend I was being emotional about the birthday thing. He told Roy, actually, he didn't tell Roy anything. They still weren't speaking, and the envelope sat on the kitchen counter untouched. A time bomb no one bothered to open. Day 5, the electric company sent an automated notice, past due. Gerald called their customer service line, gave his name, asked for the account details. I'm sorry, sir. The account is registered to Atula Meadows. He blinked. That's my daughter. I live at this address. We can only discuss account details with the registered holder. He hung up, stared at the phone. Day 7, a letter from the bank. Not a bill, a formal notice. Mortgage payment overdue. He tore open the envelope standing at the mailbox. The name on the mortgage, Tula E. Meadows. Gerald read it twice. Then he carried it inside and dropped it on the kitchen table in front of Linda. What the hell is this? Linda picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page. Her mouth opened, closed. That's impossible. This is our house. That's what I said. Gerald went to the filing cabinet in the hallway closet, the one he hadn't opened in years. He pulled folders, tax returns, old pay stubs, insurance papers. He searched for a deed, a title, anything with his name on it. Nothing. Not a single document tied him to the house. Then Linda remembered the envelope. She walked back to the kitchen counter. The white envelope was still there, now with a coffee ring on one corner. She tore it open. Pages. Dozens of pages. Bank statements going back 4 years. Each one highlighted. Each one showing auto-pay withdrawals from Tula's checking account. Mortgage, electric, water, insurance, tax. Total $134,000. Linda sat down. She didn't speak for a long time. Gerald stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. His face had gone gray. But they still didn't know the worst part. The house wasn't just in my name because of payments. It had never been in Gerald's name, not once. Gerald did what Gerald always did when he lost control. He picked up the phone and started narrating. Within 24 hours, half the family had heard his version. Tula walked out. Tula canceled the credit card. Tula stopped paying bills. She's punishing us because she didn't get enough attention at her birthday. Some people believed him. They always had. But something was different this time. Some people remembered that night at Rossini's. They remembered Gerald's face when he said those words. They remembered the silence that followed. And they remembered that not a single person in that room, including themselves, had stood up. Cousin Hannah called me on a Thursday evening. I almost didn't answer. But Hannah and I had been close once, before Gerald's gravity pulled everyone into his orbit. Tula, what's going on? Your dad says you're trying to punish them. I leaned against my kitchen counter. My kitchen counter, in my studio apartment, where the only sounds were mine. Hannah, I said. Did he tell you what he said to me at my birthday? Silence. What did he say? Ask him. Ask him in front of people. She didn't respond for a moment. Then, quietly. I was there, Tula. I heard it. I didn't know what to do. I know, I said. Nobody did. Meanwhile, Gerald made one more call. He drove to Uncle Roy's house, the brother he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, and knocked on the door. Roy opened it, looked at Gerald for a long time. I need your help, Gerald said. Tula's gone off the deep end. Roy leaned against the doorframe. Gerald, did you really say that to her? At her birthday? Gerald's jaw tightened. She provoked me. Roy shook his head, slowly. A father doesn't say that, not to his child, not ever. And he closed the door. He found me on a Tuesday, I don't know how. I suspect he called the hospital and someone mentioned seeing me near the east side. Or maybe he drove around until he spotted my car. Either way, I came home from a shift to find Gerald Meadows standing outside my apartment door, arms crossed, jaw set, looking like a man about to deliver a performance, not an apology. I unlocked the door, stood in the frame, didn't step aside. You need to come home, he said. This has gone far enough. I looked at him. My father. 58 years old, gray at the temples, the same broad shoulders, the same voice that used to fill every room. But standing in my hallway, under fluorescent lighting, he looked smaller than I remembered. You told me you wished I was never born, I said. In front of 43 people, on my birthday. I was upset. You were being difficult. Saying no to giving away my savings is not being difficult, it's being an adult. His nostrils flared. I'm your father. Then act like one. We stood there, 3 feet apart. The hallway smelled like someone's dinner. Garlic, onion, something warm that had nothing to do with either of us. You can't just leave, he said. His voice dropped. Not softer. Thinner. Bills are piling up. The mortgage is late. Linda is not my responsibility, I said. Neither is Brielle. Neither is the house. I paused. You told me you wished I was never born. I'm simply granting your wish. I closed the door. Gently. No slam. No dramatic exit. Just a soft click and the sound of his breathing on the other side. He stood there for a while. I know because I watched the shadow of his shoes under the door. Then he left. But he didn't know what was coming next. 2 weeks after I left, Gerald called a family meeting. He chose the community center attached to our church, a beige room with folding chairs, buzzing overhead lights, and a coffee urn that was always either empty or burned. About 30 people came, aunts, uncles, cousins. Some I hadn't seen since Eleanor's funeral. Gerald stood at the front like he was conducting a town hall. Linda sat in the first row, tissue in hand. Brielle sat beside her, arms folded, phone face down on her lap for once. I asked everyone here, Gerald began, because we have a family situation that needs to be addressed. He launched into his version. Tula abandoned the family. Tula canceled the credit card. Tula stopped paying the bills. Tula is punishing all of them because of a misunderstanding at dinner. Linda dabbed her eyes, on cue. A few people nodded, a few shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Patricia kept her eyes on the floor. Gerald built to his closing argument. All I'm asking is that someone talks sense into her. She's hurting this family. That's when Uncle Roy stood up. He'd been sitting in the back row, quiet, arms on his knees. No one had expected him to come. Gerald certainly hadn't invited him. But Roy had heard about the meeting through Cousin Hannah, and he drove 40 minutes to be there. Gerald, Roy said. His voice was level, carpenter steady. Before you say anything else, did you invite Margaret Calloway? Gerald frowned. Who? Why would I? The side door opened. Margaret Calloway stepped in. 64 years old, gray blazer, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a leather portfolio under her arm. She nodded once at Gerald. Mr. Meadows, I'm here on behalf of your daughter. She paused. And your mother. The room went dead silent. Margaret didn't rush. She set her portfolio on the folding table at the front of the room, opened it, and removed a single document in a clear plastic sleeve. My name is Margaret Calloway. I'm an estate and real estate attorney. I was Eleanor Meadows' legal counsel for 23 years, and her friend for longer than that. She placed the document flat on the table. 2 years before her passing, Eleanor Meadows executed a legal transfer of the property at 412 Birchwood Lane to her granddaughter, Tula Eleanor Meadows. The transfer was notarized, recorded with the county, and is fully binding. She slid the document forward. The deed, clear as daylight. Gerald stared at it. His face didn't move. "That's impossible," he said. "That is my house." Margaret looked at him over her reading glasses. "Your name has never been on the deed, Mr. Meadows. Your mother purchased the home in 1987. She chose who would inherit it." The room erupted in murmurs. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Linda shot to her feet. "That can't be right. We've lived there for—" "You've lived there as permitted occupants," Margaret said, "not as owners." Gerald's hands gripped the edge of his chair. "My mother would never do this behind my back." Roy stood again. He'd been quiet until now. "She did, Gerald." His voice was low but firm. "I was there. I witnessed the signing." The room turned to Roy, 30 faces, recalculating. Gerald stared at his brother. "You knew?" "Mom asked me to be there. She said you'd understand eventually." Roy swallowed. "She also said you probably wouldn't." Gerald opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Linda grabbed Brielle's arm. Brielle shook her off, and Margaret calmly reached into her portfolio for the next set of documents. "In addition," Margaret continued, unclipping a thick stack of highlighted pages, "over the past 4 years, Tula Meadows has personally paid the full mortgage, homeowner's insurance, property tax, and all utilities for the property at 412 Birchwood Lane." She spread the statements across the table like a dealer laying out cards. Mortgage, $1,400 per month. Insurance, $380 quarterly. Property tax, $4,200 annually. Utilities, averaging $600 per month. She adjusted her glasses. Total personal expenditure, approximately $134,000. All documented, all from Tula's individual checking account. The room didn't erupt this time. It sank. The kind of silence where you can hear someone swallow 3 rows back. Aunt Patricia, the woman who had called me to ask why I was giving my father a hard time, pressed her hand over her mouth. Cousin Hannah stared at the table. Her eyes were wet. An uncle near the back leaned forward. "She paid for the whole house? This whole time?" "She did," Margaret said. "And during that same period, a supplementary credit card linked to Tula's account was used for personal purchases by other household members. Those charges were also paid by Tula." Linda's face went white. Not pink with embarrassment, white, drained. "She lived there for free," Linda blurted. That was her contribution to the family. Room and board." Margaret looked at Linda, not unkindly, but without a trace of indulgence. "Mrs. Meadows, Tula was paying the mortgage on a property she legally owns. If anything, she was subsidizing your housing." Someone in the back row let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Gerald hadn't moved. He sat with both hands on his knees, staring at the bank statements from 4 feet away, as if looking at them too closely might make them more real. These were numbers, not opinions. Numbers don't take sides. Aunt Patricia stood first. She was 61, 5'2", and had never raised her voice at a family gathering in her life. She looked at Gerald the way you look at someone you're seeing clearly for the first time. "Gerald," she said, "you stood in that restaurant and told that girl you wished she was never born. The girl who paid for your roof?" Gerald didn't answer. Cousin Hannah spoke next, her voice cracking. "I called her. I called Tula and accused her of being selfish. She didn't even defend herself. She just asked if I knew what you said." Uncle Ray, Gerald's cousin from Ohio, crossed his arms. "Eleanor knew. She saw this coming. That's why she did what she did." Gerald tried to regain the room. He straightened in his chair, squared his shoulders, and used the voice that had controlled this family for decades. "This is a family matter. Margaret, I think you should leave." Margaret closed her portfolio with one smooth motion. "I was asked to present a file. The file has been presented." She nodded once. "Good evening." She walked out the side door. No drama. No final word. Just a woman who had done exactly what she came to do. The door clicked shut. Gerald looked around the room. 30 faces. Not one of them was on his side. Roy sat back down, arms folded. Patricia shook her head. Hannah wiped her eyes. Linda grabbed Brielle's wrist. We're leaving. Brielle pulled her arm free. No, Brielle said. It was one word. Quiet. But Linda's head snapped toward her daughter like she'd been slapped. Brielle! I said no, Mom. It was the first time I'd ever heard Brielle refuse Linda anything. I wasn't in that room. But Roy told me about it later, and when he described that moment, even he sounded surprised. I want to ask you something real. If you were in my shoes right now, knowing everything you know, would you give Gerald a second chance, or would you draw the line for good? Type second chance or boundary in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your take. Now let me tell you what I decided, because it wasn't simple. 2 days after the family meeting, Margaret sent a formal letter to Gerald and Linda. 60-day notice to vacate the property at 412 Birchwood Lane. It was typed on firm letterhead, sent certified mail. Every line was legally precise, procedurally clean, and completely within my rights as the property owner. I didn't send it myself. I didn't attach a personal note. Margaret handled it the way she handled everything, correctly. That night, Gerald called me 17 times. Calls 1 through 10 were angry. I know because I listened to the voicemails the next morning in order, like chapters of a book I already knew the ending to. You think this is funny? This is my family's house. You ungrateful. Click. Calls 11 through 15 shifted, harder to listen to. The anger started to crack, and underneath it was something thinner. Desperation. Tula, we can talk about this. Just tell Margaret to pull the letter back. I'll apologize. Is that what you want? Call 16 was silence. 28 seconds of breathing, then he hung up. Call 17. The last one. Gerald's voice stripped of everything. No authority, no performance. Tula, please. Where are we supposed to go? I sat on the edge of my bed in my studio apartment, morning light through the window, a mug of coffee going cold on the nightstand. I played that last voicemail twice. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication or any of the things people think you're supposed to feel when the person who hurt you finally breaks. I felt something quieter, like setting down a bag I'd been carrying for 20 years and realizing how badly my shoulders ached. I saved the voicemail, closed my phone, and went to work. I had a 12-hour shift. Patients needed me. That hadn't changed. 3 days later, Brielle called. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me tap the green button. Maybe the memory of her pulling her arm away from Linda in that church room. Maybe curiosity. Tula. Her voice was thick, congested. She'd been crying. Please, can we just talk? I'm listening. If we lose the house, my wedding, everything, it's all falling apart. Can you tell Margaret to stop? I leaned against my kitchen counter. Outside, a neighbor's kid was riding a bicycle in circles. The normalcy of it felt surreal. Brielle, did you watch the video you recorded that night? Silence. What video? At the restaurant. You pointed your phone at me while Dad said those words. You didn't put it down. You didn't say, Dad, stop. You just recorded. More silence. Longer this time. I didn't mean... I know, I said. That's exactly the problem. You never mean anything. Things just happen around you and you let them. I could hear her breathing, ragged, uneven. I'm not doing this to punish you, Brielle. I need you to understand that. I'm not punishing Dad. I'm not punishing Linda. I am done being the person who sacrifices everything so everyone else is comfortable. But where will we... That's not my question to answer anymore. A long pause. I could hear Linda's voice in the background, muffled, urgent, coaching Brielle on what to say next. I have to go, I said. Tula, wait. Brielle, I wish you well. I really do. But this conversation is over. I hung up. Set the phone face down on the counter. It was the gentlest ending I could offer. And it was still one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it wasn't the last call I received that week. The call came on a Friday evening. I didn't recognize the number, almost let it go to voicemail. But I'd had enough voicemails for one lifetime, so I answered. Tula, this is Derek Collins. I set down the takeout container I'd been eating from. Brielle's fiancé. We'd never spoken one-on-one before. Not once. I know this is unexpected, he said. His voice was careful, measured, like a man who'd spent days rehearsing this call. I wanted to say something, and I think I owe it to you to say it directly. I'm listening. I was there that night. At the restaurant. I saw what happened. A breath. I should have said something. I should have stood up. I didn't, and I'm sorry. I stared at the wall of my apartment. A crack ran along the plaster near the ceiling. I'd been meaning to mention it to the landlord. Thank you, Derek. There's more. Another pause. I've been watching how your family treats you, not just that night, the months before. The way Linda talks about you when you're not in the room, the way Gerald takes credit for things I now know you paid for. His voice tightened. Honestly, Tula, I'm rethinking a lot of things. My chest ached, not from pain, from something rarer, recognition. That's between you and Brielle, I said softly. I know it is, but I wanted you to know. Someone in that room saw you, and what your father did was wrong. For the first time since the night of my birthday, my eyes stung. I blinked hard. Twice. Thank you, I said again. And I meant it in a way I couldn't fully explain. We said goodbye. I sat very still for a while. Someone saw me. After all of it, someone actually saw me. Week 3. Gerald and Linda moved out of 412 Birchwood Lane. Not because the 60 days were up, they had time left, but because the mortgage was past due, the electric bill was in collections, and Gerald couldn't bring himself to call me and ask for help paying for a house he now knew wasn't his. Uncle Roy took them in. He set up the spare bedroom, made space in the garage for Gerald's boxes, cooked dinner the first night without saying much. That was Roy, practical before emotional. But he had one rule. You can stay, he told Gerald, but you don't speak her name like that under my roof. Gerald nodded. He didn't argue. According to Roy, it was the first time in decades that Gerald accepted a condition from his younger brother without pushback. The wider family knew everything now. Margaret's presentation at the church had traveled through the Meadows network like a shockwave. Aunt Patricia called to apologize. Cousin Hannah sent a long text that ended with, I should have spoken up that night. I'm sorry I didn't. 4 or 5 other relatives reached out, some awkward, some tearful, some just short messages, thinking of you. Linda, meanwhile, tried a different strategy. She posted on Facebook a long, emotional status about being forced out of our home by a vindictive stepdaughter. She tagged 6 family members and added a crying emoji. It lasted 2 hours. Cousin Hannah replied with a screenshot of the bank statements, names and account numbers blacked out, but the totals clear. 23 people saw it before Linda deleted the entire post. Brielle's social media went dark. Her Instagram, which usually posted 3 times a day, showed nothing for the first time in years. The silence from that corner was louder than anything she'd ever posted. Margaret delivered the second envelope on a gray Wednesday morning. She'd been holding it for 2 years, sealed, handwritten, with instructions from Eleanor that were specific down to the timing. Give this to Gerald only after he learns the truth about the house. Eleanor had known. She'd known how this story would unfold. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. The inevitability. Roy told me later what happened. Gerald was alone in Roy's spare bedroom. Margaret had dropped the envelope at the front door with Roy, who carried it upstairs and set it on the dresser. From Mom, Roy said. Margaret says she wanted you to have it when you were ready. Gerald stared at the envelope for an hour before he opened it. The letter was 2 pages. Eleanor's handwriting. Neat, slanted slightly to the right, the way she wrote recipe cards and birthday notes. I never read the full thing. Gerald never showed it to anyone. But Roy saw him afterward, and the parts Gerald eventually repeated, in fragments over weeks, were enough. Eleanor wrote that she loved her son. She also wrote that she'd watched him punish a child for a grief that was never that child's fault. You blame her for Emily's death, she wrote. But Emily died loving both of you. Don't punish the living for the grief of losing. She explained why she gave the house to me, not as punishment, as protection. Tula is the only one in this house who knows how to love without keeping score. She's also the only one who would never ask for what she deserves, so I'm making sure she has it whether she asks or not. Gerald sat in that room for a very long time. When he came downstairs, his eyes were red. He didn't say a word. He called me 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer. I'd gotten used to silence by then. The good kind. The kind that belongs to you because no one is filling it with demands. But I picked up. I don't entirely know why. Maybe because it was the first time he'd called just once, at a normal hour, without following up 17 more times. Tula. Dad. A long pause. I could hear Roy's house in the background. A clock ticking. Something humming. A refrigerator, maybe. I read Mom's letter, he said. I waited. I don't... He stopped. Started over. His voice was rough, unsteady, like he was speaking a language he hadn't used in years. I don't know how to fix this. I pressed the phone against my ear, closed my eyes. I'm not asking you to fix it, Dad. I'm asking you to stop breaking it. He didn't respond right away. When he spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. Can I see you? Not yet. When? I don't know. Maybe someday. But only if things are actually different, not performed. Different. Silence. Then, okay. No fight, no lecture, no, after everything I've done for you. Just, okay. We stayed on the line for another 10 seconds without speaking. Then I said goodbye, and I hung up. I stood by the window in my apartment. The sun was setting behind the buildings across the street, turning everything gold and long-shadowed. I wasn't forgiving him. I want to be clear about that. Forgiveness isn't a phone call. It's not a single moment. It's a process that requires evidence, not just words. And I hadn't seen evidence yet. But I'd heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not an apology, something smaller, something that might, in time, grow into one. Or it might not. And I'd be okay with that too. 3 months later. My apartment is 400 square feet. The hot water takes 90 seconds to warm up. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbor's cat meowing at 5 in the morning. It's mine. I still work at the hospital. Still take night shifts. Still eat leftovers in the break room on Tuesdays. But when I check my bank account now, the number is mine. Every dollar earned, every dollar spent, accounted for on my terms. Uncle Roy comes by every Sunday. He brings coffee from the place on Elm Street and sits on my second-hand couch and tells me about whatever he's building in his shop that week. We don't talk about Gerald much. We don't need to. Cousin Hannah has become something I didn't expect. A real friend. She texts me recipes. She showed up with a houseplant last month and a card that said, "For your new beginning." It sits on the windowsill next to Eleanor's photo. That photo, Eleanor and me at the county fair the summer I turned 11, is hanging on the wall across from my bed. Next to it, my nursing license, framed. 2 things I earned. 2 things no one can take. Last week, Derek texted me. Short, polite. He and Brielle have postponed the wedding. I need to figure out what kind of family I'm marrying into, he wrote. I didn't reply. That's not my story to write. Brielle hasn't called. I don't know what she's feeling. I hope, somewhere under the silence, she's asking questions she never thought to ask before. But that's her work, not mine. And Gerald? He sent a Christmas card. No apology inside, no letter. Just my name on the front, written in his handwriting. Tula. That's all. Just my name. Like he was practicing saying it without flinching. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because maybe you're sitting somewhere right now, in a house you pay for but don't feel welcome in, next to people who take everything you give and call it not enough. Staring at a phone full of messages from someone who hurt you and wants you to pretend it didn't happen. I've been there. I know what that silence sounds like from the inside. Leaving wasn't revenge. I know some people will call it that. They'll say I was cold. They'll say I should have tried harder, talked it out, given another chance, another year, another $100,000 of patience. But leaving was the first time I chose myself. And I don't think that's cold. I think it's the warmest thing I've ever done. You don't need someone's permission to protect your own life. You don't need the person who hurt you to agree that it was wrong before you're allowed to walk away. You don't need to scream or argue or build a case. Sometimes you just fold the napkin, stand up, and go. My grandmother taught me that, not in words, but in the way she lived. She loved fiercely and she planned carefully, and when she saw something wrong, she didn't make a speech. She made a move, quiet strength. If this story touched something in you, I want you to know, you're not alone. And you don't have to stay in a room where no one sees you just because it's the only room you've ever known. There are doors, and they're yours to open. Leaving wasn't revenge. Leaving was the first time I chose myself. And I'd make the same choice again. Every single time. If you stayed until the very end, thank you, sincerely. Now I want to know, do you think Gerald has really changed? Or is it just temporary regret? Type changed or temporary in the comments. I read every single one and I'll heart the ones that make me think. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. There's another one waiting for you. I'll see you there.